here. Yeah, this is my first live stream by myself, and this is a review on one movie that I hold particularly, fondly in my heart. And to celebrate the occasion, I've changed my, profile picture on StreamYard to something that resembles Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with my favorite turtle, Raphael. And the topic that I'm talking about today is the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. My introduction to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the reason why I'm still a fan today of this franchise. Normally, I would have done a normal review and talked about how much I love this movie and why it's great. But considering it's 30th anniversary, I know I missed, you know, it off by a day or two, but I figured it would be a great time to talk about it. I haven't really talked about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that much on this channel, you know, since like the early 2010s, unfortunately. My channel mainly became a Star Wars centric channel. So, for those who watch my content mainly for my Star Wars reviews, I'm doing this because TMNT is a franchise that I'm almost as passionate as I am of Star Wars. And the very first Ninja Turtles movie is a movie I hold dear to my heart. So if you're watching this video, keep, you know, the non, TMNT related, questions, away from this video for the time being, because this is exclusively about this movie. And maybe if you have some questions about Teenage Ninja Turtles, I'll answer to the best of my ability. So, let's begin. What's the significance, about this particular movie in particular? The first Ninja Turtles movie came out in 1990, and well, you could think of it as the official end to the 80s era and the start of the 90s era. And it shows with this film, the way it's filmed, and the way, everything looks in this film. This movie does look like an 80s movie. Well, duh, it was filmed in the late 1980s. And one thing about this movie is it was directed, you know, and the by a guy, I forgot his name at this time. Correct me in the comment section. I'm not very good with names, so forgive me. But this movie was made with a low budget, and well, considering how low the budget was for this movie, I think they did pretty good for what they had. And I just have to just talk about it. Maybe if this is not that great of a view, I'm sorry, but I'm just doing this in podcast form, which is not something I am used to when it comes to doing a review. Anyway, this movie is like, Jesus, I can't believe it's 30 years old. I'm like 31 years old at the time I'm recording this. I'll be 32 in a few months. Like, fucking Christ. Whew. Anyway, now, one thing about this movie that I really do like, if you've read the original Mirage comics, you'll recognize some of the scenes in this movie that were taken directly from the comic. Like, the first encounter of Casey Jones feels like a shot for shot adaptation of the Raphael one shot issue. There's even, a shot for shot adaptation of one of the issues, if you've read the comics, of the Leonardo issue, except instead of Leonardo, being the the one that gets beat up and knocked unconscious, it's Raphael. And I'll look at this. Some people said that the 1990 TMNT movie was only made to capitalize on the popularity of Tim Burton's Batman. I never heard about that, to be honest. But honestly, I don't think they're completely wrong. I mean, unlike the other movies that came after it, this movie is, has a darker, tone. It isn't like the original cartoon. It isn't goofy. Very little, emolence from the cartoon were used in this movie, except the multicolored headbands, the turtles' love for pizza, and April O'Neil being a, news reporter, and maybe some of the turtles' basic personality traits were taken from the cartoon. These, some of them, but most of the stuff was taken directly from the comics. And if you're to watch this movie, you wouldn't know that this is a comic book movie, which it surely is. And I do consider this one of the best comic book movies ever made. Not only is it faithful to the source material, it respects, the source material. And the animatronics for the turtles looks really good, even 30 years later. Even though there are some scenes that some of the effects with the electronics haven't aged well, for the most part, these look real. They look like real mutated turtles. And it isn't like the later movies where the designs for the turtles got worse and worse. I will talk about Ninja Turtles 2 at a later time. And unlike the Bay Turtles films, these turtles aren't, ugly looking abominations like the CGI turtles. Who's your favorite turtle? Mine is Michelangelo. Well, Star Wars guy, if you that what you're seeing right now, my profile picture on this stream should answer your question. It's Raphael. Raphael is the turtle I relate to the most because of his anger, which is something that I have issue dealing with from time to time. And, I think he's the most badass of the four turtles, which I think this movie does a great job of characterizing the four turtles. You know, each of the turtles' personalities are very distinct. Like you could tell who's who besides their weapons or their color, bandanas. Raphael's the angry one, Leonardo is the calm one, and the leader. Mikey is the jokester, and Donatello is the smart one. Unlike Michael Bay's movie, which basically has the turtles dressed in ridiculous fucking costumes to distinguish who's who, even though the turtles themselves speak what kind of character they are louder than some stupid like design ever could. Now, I think the way the turtles were introduced in this particular movie was done better than any of the other films that came after it, because anticipation is built when the turtles first are introduced. The first time the turtles appear, they're in the shadows. Raphael throws a sigh, and things happen so quickly, like you don't know what's going on. If you were watching this in theaters as a kid, you'd be excited to see the turtles, and then when it gets to the title, it shows the title of the movie, just building up a little bit further, and it shows us for the first time what these turtles look like. I think the turtles, the build up to their appearance is so much better than any of the other movies, and it does it under 10 minutes. Michael Bay, you have to wait almost 30 minutes to see the turtles, which, what kind of bullshit is that? A Ninja Turtles movie that doesn't even show the turtles until like about a quarter through the movie. And if you did not know, the turtles themselves, the costumes, they weighed a lot in this movie. I'm surprised the actors in the suits were able to move around in these fucking things or even do fight scenes. Those suits were like about 200 pounds. Jesus. That was hard. But you couldn't tell if you were to watch the fight scenes in this movie, which the fight scenes in this film are the best of all the Turtles movies. The Turtles themselves, they actually use their weapons. Unlike the other movies, you don't have, Michelangelo not using his nunchucks like he does in this movie. Speaking of Michelangelo, those who are in the UK could actually confirm this because I've looked this up. Michelangelo's scenes of using nunchucks were completely edited out of the UK version of this movie. Now, I don't know if that's important for those of you who don't live in the UK, but I'm just saying if you care to know something a little interesting about the UK version. So the UK version has some footage in the movie that isn't in our version. Speaking of footage, one thing that I found to be a shame about this film, and I'm still baffled to this day, where's the special edition for TMNT 1990? I mean, this was like one of the highest grossing films, of 1990. And not to mention, it's one of the most successful movies of that particular decade. Yet, it has no special edition. I do know there does exist a commentary of this film. It does exist. But in order to actually listen to the commentary, you have to import it from Germany. So, unless you have the German Blu-ray for this movie, you're not going to be able to hear, the director of this film's, the process of what was going on in this movie from whatever scene to the next. So, it kind of sucks that there's no commentary track in this movie, even to this day. It does exist, but you have to go to the UK in order to actually, get it. Not the UK, Germany. And yeah, AK Master, yeah, you were right. I know about Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, but that's a topic for a different day. Yeah, the special edition should have come out like 10 years ago. But the fact that it's 30 years after the movie came out and still no special edition, honestly, I don't think there ever will be, unfortunately. If you want the special features and one of the deleted scenes, you have to import it from Germany. But then again, the alternate ending you can easily find on YouTube. It's not like you can't find it. It's there. I don't want to show it in this particular podcast because I don't want this to get flagged for copyright. So I'm going just type it right now if you're interested. TMNT 1990 alternate ending, and you'll see that ending is included in the comic adaptation. There were some edits though in this particular movie that if you read the novelization, if you could find it, one of the characters that Tatsu beats, up, when he's, in a fit of rage, the character, at least the guy named, I forgot his name, was killed in the novelization, but they edited that out by having him breathe after he was basically beaten to death. So yeah, this movie, I consider this the more of a mature Ninja Turtles movie, even though it's still a kids movie. I mean, who'd think these days that "damn" was is a curse word? Because back then in 1990, saying like "damn" or "hell" were considered curse words. And this is the only film in the franchise we actually have the Turtles use the word "damn" and not have it feel like cringe, like in Michael Bay's movies. Sorry if I'm roasting, Michael Bay's Ninja Turtles movie, a lot. I just hate that film. Another thing I do particularly like about this movie, I love it more like, is the soundtrack. The soundtrack for the longest time, has not been available, to like listen to outside the film, but it does exist. You can actually find it right now on YouTube. The score for TMNT 1990. You can literally find it. It's not that hard. If you want to listen to the soundtrack for the movie without, watching those poorly, ripped, soundtracks that try to take away the sound effects and the voices from the music. I'll tell you how I think about Secret of the Use in the next podcast if I do another one on the movies. I probably will. It's only fair. I mean, the first movie gets the podcast treatment, doesn't mean the second one doesn't get one as well. Um, I think the actors they chose to play, the characters, April, Casey Jones, I felt did suit the characters well, especially April. Her actress has switched, in the Ninja Turtles 2, unfortunately. I actually think that the first actress was better than the other actress they chose for the sequel. I felt it fit the character more. Even though April, the way she's characterized, is kind of a mixture of both the 80s cartoon and her comic counterpart. But it still feels like the character of April that I know from the comics. And now my boy, Casey Jones. He This version of Casey Jones, out of all the versions that have come out, whether it's the 90s, not the 90s, the 2003 cartoon, the 87 cartoon, the 2012 cartoon, that god awful Michael Bay sequel. This Casey Jones in the very first Ninja Turtles movie is my favorite of all of the Casey Jones. He's badass. The actor they chose for him looks like the character from the comic, and every scene he's in is amazing. I love this take on the character. And the close second favorite Casey Jones would probably be the 2003 version. So, yeah, I gotta answer a question about if there ever was a R-rated, Ninja Turtles movie. What do you think? Oh, I would love an R-rated Ninja Turtles movie. I think we need one. I would love to have one. Oh, I'm gonna answer. Are you gonna talk? Are you talking about video game or Turtles 3? The subtitle Turtles was part of the. Okay, Ninja Turtles 3. To answer your question really quick, was never they never had a name. That's just what the fans called it. It never was called Turtles in Time. That I hope that answers your question. I'll talk about Ninja Turtles 3 in another video, actually, depending on how this is received. Anyway, Casey Jones, I feel like is this is the Casey Jones I want to see on screen. I know the actor's way too old to do Casey Jones now, but if they do another reboot of Ninja Turtles, this is the Casey Jones I want. I want the Casey Jones that's badass, that's funny. He isn't a fucking former cop turned vigilante. I want the Casey Jones we got in the 90s Ninja Turtles movie and the comics, except amplify it. Make him, for the modern day. I know this version, may be a little dated, in 2020, but I don't care. I think this version of Casey is badass. He's my favorite version of the character, and the actor was perfect for the part. Um, Now the Shredder. I think the Shredder, in my opinion, this is probably the closest we will get to seeing the comic book version of the Shredder on screen. And the final fight scene towards the end of this movie feels like it's taken directly out of the first issue of the comic, minus Shredder getting killed by a bomb. This version of the Shredder, I feel like is like the TMNT equivalent of Darth Vader. He's menacing. He says very little, and what little time we see of him fighting the turtles is pretty damn badass. He's the kind of Shredder I can take seriously, and unfortunately, we haven't had a good Shredder in the movies since this version of the Shredder. I think in the films themselves, Shredder in 1990 is the best version. Not to mention the plot of this movie being, about family. Shredder represents the toxic element of family, while Splinter represents the positive aspect of family. Because it's an abusive relationship between the Foot Clan and these children that they essentially use, basically brainwashing them to believing no one cares about them, that they're their family. That's the kind of father figure I view Shredder as in this film. He represents the toxic element of that, relationship, while Splinter represents the positive. Those people are idiots, RK Master. He's not a Darth Vader ripoff. You know, yes, you can compare him to Darth Vader in terms of his, presence, but the Shredder in this version is far closer to his comic counterpart than that clown from the original cartoon who gets owned by everyone, even freaking little kids. I feel like this Shredder I can take seriously, which it wouldn't surprise me if this Shredder is what Peter Laird uses to, as a base for the 2003 Shredder. But that's a topic for a different day when I eventually do review the 2003 series. The the final thing about this movie that I can think of. Sorry, this is not as long as I normally make my podcast. I feel like this movie has stood the test of time, even though there are some problems with this film. I I wish the scene with Michelangelo, because if you pay attention to one point during the second act where April talks about each of the turtles, she talks about Donatello and she talks about Leonardo, but she skips over Michelangelo. Well, there is a deleted scene, which there's lots of deleted scenes in this film. I mean, I'm not going to say he said, she said. There's a lot of evidence that these deleted scenes exist, considering the Ninja Turtle cards, for the 1990 movies, has screenshots of scenes that were deleted in this movie. So there's evidence that these scenes exist. That Michelangelo, was really angry and upset over what happened with Splinter and completely destroyed, you know, the punching dummy that he was punching. If you pay attention to that scene, in the movie after Raphael wakes, I feel like that is what April would be talking about. But for some reason, that scene was deleted. I don't know why. I feel like it would have, given, more, stuff for Michelangelo to do. Because I feel like parts of Michelangelo, part of the story is kind of cut out, unfortunately, in the final cut of this movie. So I don't know. Hold on. Yeah. Now, an- another thing, about this movie, at least there's some problems, like, some of the effects, at least for the animatronic, like I said earlier, there's some parts of it that, some of the mistakes for the effects, like more, than what should have been shown. You could actually see the actors, face, at least the person that's, in the suit, if you're not paying attention. Of course, you have to pause it to notice it. I'm just saying there are some problems. But considering the fact that this movie was made with a low budget, they did an amazing job for what they had. This isn't a perfect film, it ain't a masterpiece or anything, but it's still a film that I hold, with high regard. I think it stood the test of time. 30 years later, I still, think this is a good movie. And I don't know where I would be today, at least as a person or as a fan of Ninja Turtles, if I never watched this movie. This was the first, Ninja Turtles related media that I was exposed to as a kid. I mean, still have memories of this film as a child. I mean, this was one of the first movies I saw. It, I was like 2 years old when I first saw this movie, and I still remember, a lot of this movie vividly. When I watched this as a kid, I destroyed, my first, copy of this movie because I watched it so much, on VHS. I bought the DVD and I bought the Blu-ray. I own it in almost every format that I've watched it in. And I think if you're a newer TMNT fan and you got into TMNT during the 2010s with the Nickelodeon cartoon, and I do think you should watch this film. I do think it's a good movie. And honestly, I have more nostalgia for this than I do for the original cartoon. Because what TMNT for me is family. And the turtles in this film feel like brothers. They feel like a family unit. And it is something that I can relate to considering I have siblings of my own. And I think this movie deserves far more respect than it has, and I consider it to be underrated. When you see, top 100 or top 50 best comic book movies, and there isn't no top 50, but top 20, this is nowhere near on the list of best comic book movies, despite the fact that I feel like this does a better job than most Marvel films on respecting the source material and adapting the source material and doing it, correctly. Oh yeah, Jim Henson's effects are great. I think, without him, I don't think the movie as we know it would be possible. His effects made, the low budget that they had to work with, it still made it work. Jim Henson was a genius. And that is why, the designs, degraded by Ninja Turtles 3 because Jen Henson wasn't there, but that's a topic for another time. Ninja Turtles, the original Ninja Turtles movie, I consider it a classic. I would watch this over any of the Babe Ninja Turtles movies. I would watch this probably over most comic book movies. And I would like to see a spiritual successor to this movie. I don't want, any more of this, juvenile garbage that we've seen from the Michael Bay movies in the 2010s. I want an actual real successor to this film. Yeah, the Turtles movies are terrible. If you would like, I can give it the podcast treatment. I will. I may end up doing that eventually. Anyway, TMNT 1990. I love this movie. I, it's not a perfect movie, I know, but I think it's something that all TMNT fans, old and new alike, should see. Because for me, this is the pinnacle of what TMNT is, at least one of the pinnacles. Oh, you'll get a rant on Michael Bay's Ninja Turtles movie. Oh, that will happen eventually. Because I have a lot to say about Michael Bay's Ninja Turtles movies. I have a lot to say. Even though those podcasts will likely be longer than this particular one, I think they deserve to be shitted on for an hour at least. There's not much more I can say about this movie that hasn't already been said by the, TMNT fans. I think it's a movie that I recommend anyone to watch. I think it's a good movie on its own. And I think it's the best Ninja Turtles movie, ever made. And I don't see another TMNT movie ever coming out that'll be as good as this one. Anyway, everyone, this is Darcenovia, over and out. And see you guys later. Next time, I'll talk about Secret of the Ooze and what my general thoughts about that movie almost 30 years later. Later, everyone.